Hey kids, welcome back to Uncanny channel. It is October, which means that it is the perfect time to watch scary movies, drink warm drinks, and hang out in the cool weather unless you live where I live, which means it's still in the 80s and isn't fun at all, but it's still fun to do spooky stuff. And this is the first time my channel has been around for October for Halloween, and I wanted to do something fun, so we're going to be talking about the true stories behind your favorite Halloween or scary movies. I asked you guys in my last video to send me some of your favorite movies, and I'm sure a lot of you didn't watch that video because I was sick and it was not fun or interesting to watch. It was kind of sad, and I asked you on Twitter to send me your favorite scary movies so I could research them and get some lined up that we can talk about the true stories behind them. And I want to get the series off of one of my favorite scary movies, which is the original Amityville Horror. This isn't one of my favorite scary movies because of the normal reasons, like, oh, it was so amazing and I loved it. Even though it is a good movie, it was actually the first like actual scary movie that I ever saw. I was at a sleepover when I was like 10 or 11, and the only movies I'd really seen up until the point that were like scary movies were like Hocus Pocus, like Nightmare Before Christmas, where it's like more creepy or just like has to do with like Halloween scary things than it actually is like a scary movie. And they put this movie on and I was not prepared, and I didn't sleep at all the whole night, and for like 2 nights after that, and I was like haunted by the stuff that went on in this movie. And I think that's fair for when you're 11. So I wanted to talk about this one because I think the story behind it is really interesting, and it's one that everyone kind of knows, and we can just, you know, get a good launch into the October series that I want to do. So without further ado, here is the truth behind the Amityville Horror. Oktoberfest. This case was first exposed, I guess, in the 1977 book, The Amityville Horror, by Jay Anson, which describes the paranormal activity that the Lutz family experienced at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York. There's so many aspects of this case. They're just little one-off incidents, like I heard a window open and close, but no one was there, that I'm not going to get into all the little minor like minutia of what happened, but I'm going to definitely touch on the big, like either significant things that happened or the very notable events that occurred. So if you want all the good juicy details of this case, the book is pretty readily available online, as well as I'm sure you can find it at your local library, or if you can, obviously support your local bookstore and buy a copy there. But otherwise, I'm going to do my best to give you a good overview of what happened, and we'll go on the ride together. So the history and background of this haunting actually go back to before the Lutz family moved in. It really starts in 1974 when 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo Jr. took a rifle and shot and killed his entire family in their beds. This included his parents, Ronald Sr. and Louise, and his 4 siblings, Don, Allison, Mark, and John Matthew. Ronald Jr. really went out of his way to try to make it seem initially like he hadn't committed the murders. He blamed it on a mob hit and even had an out-of-state alibi, and when he came home, came home to the murders, he ran to the local pub and told someone to call the police because he just found his entire family dead in their beds. But within a day or so, he had confessed to the murders and even told the investigators, "Once I got started, I just couldn't stop. It all happened so fast." Even during his trial, a clear motive for the murders never came out, and theories have speculated on everything from wanting to collect life insurance to being criminally insane. And obviously, after the Amityville Horror book came out, demonic possession and other supernatural culprits got added to the list as well. So that's November 1974. In December 1975, the Lutz family buys the house for $80,000. And I did the calculations, which is about $360,000 by today's standards, which is really a steal considering that it's a 3,600 square foot house in a really nice area. Like the houses in this area go for between like $400,000 or $500,000 to even like $1 million and up in this area, like in this market today. So they really got a steal on the house, probably because it's impossible to sell an infamous murder house, especially in the 1970s when no one's able to Google how to sage that shit. So Lutz family moves in mid-December of 1975, and a lot of the DeFeo's furniture is still there. Like, not like it was left there by whoever cleaned everything out and they were just negligent. Like, they paid an extra amount of money to keep the furniture in the house for convenience, which, like, A previous owner's stuff is one thing, especially if it's nice furniture, but I just don't know about buying a murder house and then keeping the dead family's furniture. It just feels like there's probably a lot of like, you know, negative residual energy attached to that furniture. Especially if they wouldn't keep the beds. I'm so sure they got rid of the beds with like the bodies. Oh, I don't know. Let's not think about it. Oh, also, they knew about the murders when they moved into the house because during one of the inspections, they were informed about the whole story and everything, and so they knew they were buying a murder house with the dead family's furniture still in it. Just saying. So the Lutz family is made up of George and Kathy, who recently got married and are buying a new home in order to combine their two households to make it more cost affordable. It's just something you do when you get married, you know. They're buying a new house to combine their households. As well as Kathy's 3 children, Daniel, Christopher, and Missy, who are 9, 7, and 5, respectively. And these are Kathy's kids from her previous marriage, but when she got remarried to George, the kids ended up taking his last name and everything, so it seems like this is a pretty like normal family unit overall. And the dog, Harry, Harry, not Hairy, which is kind of disappointing, but what can you do? So Harry, like Harry Potter, the dog. So a couple of days before they move in, a friend of theirs who knows the history of the place and everything is like, yo, you need to get a priest in here to bless this house because damn. And the Lutzes are religious. Kathy is Catholic and George is Methodist, but they're not practicing, so they don't really have any kind of like religious contacts in the area. They don't know any priests, and so they ask the friend to give them a recommendation, and he recommends Father Mancuso, which is not his real name. The name was changed for the book. We know his real name, but I'm not going to get into it. I'm just going to call him Father Mancuso because it's just easy and continuity. Father Mancuso. So Father Mancuso comes out to the house to do the blessing, and while he's there, he hears a demonic voice tell him to get out, and he starts feeling nauseous and vomiting, and he develops blisters on his hands. Eventually, he has to leave. He completes the blessing, but he ends up having to leave, like, pretty much immediately. And up until this point, the Lutz have only been there for like a day and a half. Like, they moved in the day before, and then Father Mancuso comes out to bless the place. But they hadn't really had any kind of weird stuff happen. So once this haunting starts, it really starts. It kicks off hardcore. The Lutzes only live in the house for 28 days before they move back out. So they basically live in the house for Christmas and New Year, and by mid-January they're gone because everything that's happening in this house is so over the top and terrifying. They don't want to leave their kids in the house anymore. So I went through the different occurrences and I found that you can really divide them up into 3 separate categories. General house stuff, which is like stuff that happened in the house or had to do with the house but didn't affect or target a particular person. Stuff that happened to the parents, and stuff that happened to Missy. And the 2 sons did have some things that happened to them, but it wasn't as concentrated on them. It was more like extraneous things also happened to the sons, what happened to someone else, or like they were at least not significant enough to be like majorly highlighted in the book from what I read of the book. The one son did mention he'd been briefly possessed and compared it to The Exorcist, which I don't know. This was after the book and everything, but we don't have any information about that other than him saying he was possessed, and so I'm gonna leave, you know it now, and I'm gonna leave it out of the rest of the telling. So general house things that kind of go in line with this haunting are, the house constantly had swarms of flies, even in the wintertime, and the locks, windows, and doors constantly had damage being done to them by an unseen force. On January 1st of 1976, the family noticed cloven hoof footprints in the snow outside the house. And at some point, a green gelatin-like substance oozed from the walls and the attic playroom keyhole. Those are kind of the general house things that were more than just like solitary incidents. These are things that kind of happen consistently, except for obviously the hoofs. So let's talk about now the parents, what they went through. I actually divide this up by parent, and then there are a couple things that happened to both of them. So let's start with Kathy, the mother. She described often feeling she was being touched by an unseen person, and sometimes that would manifest as like a loving embrace, and then other times it would feel more of like a shove or that kind of thing. She started having vivid nightmares about the DeFeo murders, and this was around the same time that her children started sleeping on their stomachs, which is allegedly how the children were found positioned in the home when the investors came after the DeFeo murders. And there was a particular instance when she woke up from one of these nightmares and her face was like frozen as this looked like a hag, and it remained for several hours. There's an account from George that there was a time when she appeared as an old woman to him, so this might be the same time or this might be two separate incidents. It's hard to tell. There was an incident when Kathy was in bed and she received welts on her chest from an unseen force. It was levitated 2 feet in the air, as well as a foot-tall crucifix that she'd hung on their wall rotated until it was upside down and then gave off a really sour smell. When it comes to George, he also seemed to take on some of the aspects of these DeFeo murders himself. For example, he started waking up in the middle of the night around 3:15 in the morning, which is the estimated time that the murders took place. He also seemed to look like Ronald DeFeo Jr., which it's the 70s, so like medium build white guys with a trimmed beard and a flannel shirt are not really that like few and far between. So like I'm sure he did look like Ronald DeFeo Jr., but a lot of that is attributed to the haunting, so I'll leave it in. He discovered a small hidden room in the basement that was about 4 by 5 feet with red painted walls. The family eventually came to call the Red Room. The room especially affected the dog, who would bark at it and try to avoid it as if it had some kind of like ominous, like dangerous feeling to it. George also started hearing noises in the house. He would hear the front door slam, only to run downstairs and find nothing disturbed, the dog fast asleep and not having heard anything, and no one else in the house having heard anything either. He'd also hear sounds that he described as a marching band warming up downstairs, but when he ran downstairs to see what it would suddenly cease. Both of these sound phenomena he would describe as being loud enough to wake the whole house, but no one else in the house would be disturbed by them or hear them or be wakened by them. No accounting for taste, but the family had a 4-foot-tall China lion statue in the living room that on one occasion George tripped over and looked at his leg to find a bite mark in his ankle. This is the same lion that he would later move to the sewing room upstairs, only to come downstairs and find it back in the living room. The two parents together had some weird experience with the fireplace specifically. While tending the fire, they reported seeing a demonic face with its head half blown away, burned into the back of the fireplace. George Lutz specifically became very obsessed with the fireplace and would constantly like tend to it and like stick around it even though he didn't get any warmth from it, which coincided with him secluding himself from the family. The creepiest stuff, however, happened to Missy, the family's 5-year-old daughter. Missy quickly developed an imaginary friend named Jody shortly after moving into the house, who was described as a demonic pig-like creature with glowing red eyes. However, Jody referred to her as an angel. On Christmas Day, 1975, so 6 days really after the Lutzes moved into the house, George said that he saw his daughter standing at her bedroom window with Jody standing behind her. He raced upstairs to, I guess, save her or intervene, only to find her asleep in her bed and the rocking chair in the corner of the room slowly rocking, with no one in it. Missy was also constantly singing, but only in her bedroom. She would sing the entire time that she was in the bedroom, and then the second she left the room, she would stop singing and then immediately resume singing once she re-entered. Kathy also described an incident in which she went to close her daughter's bedroom window, which Missy said that Jody had climbed out of, only to see a pair of red eyes staring back at her from outside the house. These events, among the many others that I didn't mention, all happened over the course of 28 days, and they all led up to the family's final night in the house. The family has never gone into explicit detail of what happened on the final night of the house, but based on some sources that I found, what I can glean is that somehow whatever entity was in the house managed to separate the children and the parents and tormented the children upstairs while the parents were trapped downstairs, unable to save them. Again, that's just based on a couple of sources. Who knows if that's what happened, but that's what it seems like happened on the final day that they were in the house. After that night, the Lutzes fled the house and never lived in it again. I don't know if they never returned. They may have returned to collect some of their belongings when they moved out, but they didn't stay another night in the house after that. But the story doesn't end there, because as usual, you have to get Ed and Lorraine Warren involved. Cider. I briefly described who the Warrens were in my South End Werewolf video, so I'll just give a brief description here. Essentially, all you need to know is that they're a famous husband and wife team of demonologists who have been involved in some of the most famous hauntings of the 20th century, including this one, including the one The Conjuring is based on, and so on and so forth. Basically, it's a franchise. They were involved in it somehow. So Lutzes contact the Warrens in January 1976, and By mid-February, the Warrens have come out to do a first look, see if we feel any kind of vibes or if it's just a hoax thing. Lorraine Warren described feeling an overwhelming sense of sadness and depression throughout the entire property, while Ed Warren felt a intense, inhuman presence down in the basement that was so oppressive to him he felt he might be pushed down into the floor. Basically, the Warrens were really freaked out. We're like, we need the squad, and so they got together a team of paranormal investigators and psychics to do the investigation with them, along with the Channel 5 news team. This investigation took place on March 6, 1976, about a week or so after they came out and visited. Through the investigation, the cameraman for Channel 5 reported feeling shortness of breath and heart palpitations throughout the house, and the Warrens found a cold spot on the staircase that corroborated a cold spot that George Lutz reported later in the book. Among the group of investigators that the Warrens brought with them was the psychic Mary Pasquilla Downey, who reported trying to say the Allfather and witnessing a group of apparitions saying the Allfather back to her, only backwards. During the seance portion of the investigation, Mary felt so sick that she had to be removed from the house. And she and another psychic, Alberta Riley, described seeing a dark shadow in the house that made your heart race when it moved around. Lorraine Warren explained that she could sense the entity was not tied to the house, but had chosen the house as a kind of resting place. The investigation concluded that there was definitely a lot of paranormal activity or even demonic activity in the house, and the Warrens advised the Lutzes to pursue getting an exorcist or a Catholic priest to come in and do an exorcism rite in order to cleanse the house, but the Lutzes declined because they didn't want to put anyone in any kind of danger. The Lutzes officially returned the house to the lender on April 30th, 1976. This is probably one of the most controversial accounts of paranormal activity, maybe ever, at least in America, because after the book came out, and especially when the movie popularized the book even further, there was a lot of dispute from people either involved in the case or from paranormal investigators and the supernatural community in general about whether or not the accounts were true or false. The priest described in the book as getting sick when he came to bless the house when Lutzes first moved in later came forward and said that that never happened. The sources kind of vary on whether or not he came to the house at all. Some of them say that he came to the house but he didn't get sick, he just blessed it and left and didn't feel any kind of presence or have any interference with his blessing. And other accounts say he didn't come to the house at all and only spoke to the family on the phone. There's also a lot of controversy over the validity of the cloven footprints that they claim to see outside the house on the first of the year, because apparently there was no snow at the time, and I can't tell if it didn't snow that day or if there's no snow on the ground, but there's a lot of dispute over that because it was not apparently a time when there was snow. Furthermore, a lot of minor details changed throughout the different versions of the book. For example, the make and model of the priest's car changed between being a Ford and then later they're, I think, like a Honda maybe, but they go back to being a Ford then in even later editions. So a lot of the minor details change a lot as well, which degrades the integrity of the text in general. One of the most damning pieces of evidence that the accounts are false is that the Lutzes were in the process of suing several people and entities for privacy violation, unlawfully using their names for monetary gain, etc., etc. And one of those people that they sued was a man named William Weber, who was Ronald DeFeo's defense attorney during his criminal trial. In a September 1979 issue of People, Weber was describing a meeting that he had with the Lutzes, talking about different events that they experienced, and eventually that meeting became an outline for what would later become the book. And in discussing that meeting, he said, "I know this book is a hoax. We created this story over many bottles of wine." On the other hand, the Lutzes did take polygraph tests, which I don't know what they're called in other countries. In America, it's a polygraph test, but it's basically a lie detector test. They took a lie detector test about the phenomenon that they described, and it said that they were telling the truth. George DeFeo also released a statement that said that the account in the book is mostly true and that he didn't greenlight any kind of fabrication. To be fair, polygraph tests are not really reliable. That's why they're not really admitted in criminal cases anymore, but there is that. As far as where the house is now, it's changed hands a few times, but any family or couple that's lived in the house since the Lutzes moved out, so they haven't experienced any kind of paranormal activity in the house. And the strangest thing that they have experienced is fans of the book and movie coming by to scope the place out. So that is the Amityville Horror Haunting, the true story. I thought it was interesting how many things from the book didn't make it to the movie, as well as how many things from the movie were made up that weren't in the book. Like I think there's a point in the movie where the mom's aunt or someone comes to the house and she's a nun and she like has to leave because she's super sick because like the demons, and that's not in the book at all. She does have an aunt who is a nun, but she never came to the house and she definitely didn't get sick there. So I think it's very interesting to see the translation of the events to book and then the book to the movie. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Obviously, if you have opinions about it, share it below. I don't really have an opinion. I think that it's interesting that no one who lived in the house after them had any paranormal experiences, but that could just be because whatever entity it is tied to the family and not to the house, or they just happen to cross paths and coincide at the house, but neither of them obviously is stagnant there, so the family didn't have any paranormal experiences after that, and no one who was in the house after them had experiences because the entity was gone. Either way, I hope that you guys enjoyed this, and I'm excited to look into movies that I either haven't seen or I don't know the true story of, so I encourage you, please send me more and more and more suggestions. It doesn't have to be your one favorite, it can be your 5 favorites or your 20 favorites. Anyway, I will see you guys very soon. If you are excited about Halloween and October and the fall, I don't care if it's basic, I'm excited about the fall and the cold weather and Halloween. And if you're the same way, like this video and let me know below, and be sure to subscribe and ding the bell so you get a notification when I post my next video about the true stories behind your favorite horror movies. And above all, remember that it's an awesome thing to believe in the unbelievable, and have a great weekend and a great October, and I will see you in my next video in a few days. Bye. Bye.